What's up, guys? Welcome back to Not Another Tech Podcast, where we talk about all things Microsoft security and, quite frankly, anything else that takes our fancy this week. I am down one co-host today, as Steve couldn't make it. But Andy, how are you, dude?
Good, thanks. You?
Yeah, really well, thank you. And for those of you watching, you'll also notice we have someone else with us today for what is our first ever episode to include a guest on the show. James, it's wonderful to have you with us today. How about you go ahead and introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sure. Cheers, Nick. Thanks for having me, firstly. So I'm James Agombar. I own Security Ninja Limited, a cybersecurity company. I specialize in Microsoft cloud security, security architecture, auditing, that type of thing, and now getting heavily involved in vibe coding.
Awesome. Thank you. It's really good to have you on. And we've obviously chatted a few times. We spoke at, I think it was at South Coast Summit first
It
time.
was, yeah.
You came up to see me. I totally didn't recognize you. It just goes to show, like, when you've been chatting to people on LinkedIn for so long, sometimes you
That's it.
struggle to put a face to a name, don't you? But yeah, no, it's good to have you on, and good to hear that you're vibe coding because that is the topic of today's episode, right?
Yeah, and it's something I just fell into. So I think what's been great out of it as well is I joined these other communities, and so many people are kind of dipping their toe into it, like us. And it's opening so many opportunities. It really
Yes.
is.
Yes, I totally agree. And I guess so. Let's kind of break it down a little bit when we sort of say vibe coding. What does that kind of really mean? Because I know all three of us are kind of doing it and dipping our toe in different ways. But I guess, James, I don't know if you want to start, if you want to sort of just let us know, what does kind of vibe coding mean to you and kind of how are you going about? What's your sort of typical stack, if you like?
Yeah, so it's really developed very quickly, and I've only been doing it probably less than 2 months, to be honest. And it was one of those things. I had some spare time. I've been seeing a lot of other MVPs developing great websites that they've been sharing their own applications and things, and I think, how are they doing this? This is fantastic. And then finding out that it's not as complicated as you think. It's literally talking to AI and saying, I want you to produce a thing, and this is kind of roughly how I want it to look. And kind of that's where it started. But going on from there, finding out there's other capabilities, because as we all know that AI can be very inaccurate, and sometimes you're almost
Clever.
gaslighting it to
Yeah.
to say, that's not right, is it? Oh, you're absolutely right. Yeah, let me change that. Um, at which point I came across MCP servers, which again I'd heard mentioned in conversations, but I knew nothing about it. And that
Yeah.
was kind of a gateway to getting more accurate information for me to then start producing tools that I was developing to help people, but also try and simplify tasks that I think are too complicated or there isn't the right solution in place. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking the other day that it's almost like when 3D printers were created, where you can go off and make a thing to solve a problem. We've now got AI enabling people like myself. I can't write code. I can't write anything, that I can now go and produce a thing that will solve a problem for me, and it doesn't take long. And
Yeah.
that's incredible, you know? So,
I couldn't agree more. I think I remember sitting in on a Experts Live user group, UK user group, when we first started the user group up back in London, and I think it was the first one we ever did. And Kevin decided to kind of line us all up, and the first user group session was on AI, and it was like we had to talk about what AI meant to us. And I remember thinking at the time, like, geez, like I have no idea what to say here. Like I'm barely even using it. I mean, this was like a year and a half ago. But I remember saying, that it enables me to do things that I was never able to do. And that holds true now, a year and a half later, and even more so to your point of not writing code. Neither do I. It was just a skill I never was able to pick up. I did try a long time ago to learn like HTML. I kind of did it for a little while, and I was like, yeah, it's okay, but it just I just really struggled with it. Really struggled with the idea of being able to write code. I really struggled to look at it and kind of reason over it. So it's something I never picked up. So much like you, I'm exactly the same in that respect. But what I can do is start with an initial idea, like a small vision, and iterate and build on it. And the thing is, that's all you really need now, right? That's all you need
Yeah,
in order to build
absolutely.
a product.
I mean, it was my very first experience writing code was back in school, where we had this old BBC Micro PC. So James, you'll know what I'm talking about, mate. You probably have no idea what these are. And it was the 10 print, teacher smells, 20 go to 10, and that was my extent of programming. And getting out of that, the only way to do it, I think, was turn the PC off. But that was the fun and games. Then I got into things like VB back in the early days, so VB3, VB4. I actually wanted to go to uni to do software engineering, but I didn't get the grades I needed, and I was more akin to kind of technical stuff anyway. But it's like you said, James. We now see gaps in what we're doing, and we can then plug that gap with an app or something.
Yeah.
And it's just brilliant. I mean, AI just in the last 6 months, 12 months has just changed hugely. I mean, when it first came out, I just thought it was all hype. I'll be honest. I was like, oh, this is just it's just Google on steroids.
Yeah.
What's the real added value? But now, like you both, I'm creating these apps that will plug gaps that I see, and other things. It's both professional and personal use, and I absolutely love it. I mean, being dyslexic, AI is absolutely fantastic for me because I just put my jumbled up words, writing, and everything into Copilot, and that actually gives me something that's readable. And it's
Yes.
like it makes sense for all my mixed up words, mixed up spelling. And I look at the word and think, what the heck was I typing there? But AI seems to know what I'm typing.
Yeah, great point. I mean, even when you just sort of take away from the code and the building of the applications, just using it for things like that, reasoning over your own thoughts and putting it into some sort of cohesive language for other people to read
Yeah,
I'm the same. I do exactly the same. So you talked a little bit about, well, you sort of mentioned MCP servers, James, but before we kind of sort of jump into that, it'd be interesting. I'd like to know kind of what your uh, AI stack looks like.
Mm, okay.
In terms of what AI tooling are you actually using at the moment?
Yeah. So I'm now using Claude and OpenAI Codex in anger. And it's taken me a
Okay.
while to kind of get used to their capabilities. Obviously, people are talking about the cost side of it now, where Claude is getting very expensive. I started off at the Pro plan at £20 a month, and I've now gone up to the max, which is 100,
Oh wow.
purely because it's just hammering that thing, and I didn't have the patience to wait 4 hours for it to refresh. So kind of where it's got to now, I guess, is I use Claude a lot for ideas, and
it's
I've got
nice.
some nice things set up with it. So it's Claude is brilliant at designing things visually and also conceptually. So what the way I've got it working now is it's hooked into Obsidian, which I've been using for years as kind of storing information, but it's hooked in via an MCP server. So what I can now do is say, come up with a concept. These are the kind of things I'm working on. Help me develop a deployment plan, and then write that to Obsidian. And so instead of having to go back to Claude each time to find that prompt that I wrote, and after a while, you create lots of prompts. In there is a beautifully laid out document, in essence, of that requirement that I asked for. I've now extended that a bit more when I'm using Dispatch, which is another new feature of Claude. I've got that on my mobile phone, so as long as my MacBook's on, which it is 24/7, if I'm sitting in the lounge, I've got an idea, I can just open Dispatch and say, can you just add this to my inbox, which is Obsidian? I've got this idea for such and such, and I'll just sit later. And then there's a task in Claude, which then sends me a daily reminder of all of those tasks that I've been thinking about. So I can then go through and tick them off as I've done them. So that is incredibly helpful to me on that side.
It's nice.
Um, I've got to the point now where I'm using VS Code for kind of managing everything. So I've got the plugins for Claude, Copilot, and Codex. That Codex is mainly the tool I'm using for the coding side. It just does a good job at it. Um, Apparently there are some changes coming in where they're going to start imposing some limits. So
Okay.
see how that goes. Because boy, do I hammer it. I mean, literally, I think with Claude Pro, it's after about 5 prompts, done, and you'd have to wait
Yeah.
another 5 hours. Whereas Codex, I've no idea. I've never hit a limit, and
Yeah.
I really do hammer it. So yeah, it's kind of those are the main tools I use. I've had to learn GitHub integration. Again, I'm not a developer,
It's nice.
and it humbles you because you realize, especially how clever people are that do all this stuff as a
Yeah.
day job. And well, when does the learning stop? You know,
It's,
it's
never.
relentless.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I think that's the side that we're not talking about. Maybe is it people are kind of it's become a joke, vibe coding, and I get that. But you do have to have a certain amount of a skill around it as well, because if you want to do something with what you've made, you have to know how to host it, where to host it, all the other considerations that go with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, the past 2 months has just been it's been tough,
It's the
without a doubt.
logic behind it as well,
Mm,
because it's all very well saying, right, I want an app to do this,
yeah,
but actually you really need to understand what you're trying to achieve. Because it's AI still very much like that over enthusiastic intern. If you get a very high level thing, it will give you very high level output. Whereas, yeah, you really need to be as descriptive as you can. And it's like we've all said, it's only going to be as good as your prompt. So you need to
yes,
know what you're prompting. You don't necessarily need to understand the full ins and outs of development. I mean, mine, whenever I push it, it talks about CID, CD, CI/CD. So the software lifecycle kind of things.
mm,
And it's like, that's way above my
yeah,
head.
yes,
I kind of understand what it's doing, but I just leave Copilot to take care of that in VS Code for me. But the other stuff, it's once you start getting into the intricacies, and you can then say, no, I want it to do this. This is what it should be looking at. That's where it helps, I think. So you do have to be switched on.
yeah,
I'm not saying it's not everyone can't do vibe coding because they can, but if you want to do something rich, you need to really know what the product is inside out almost to get the most out of it.
Yeah. And I think um, you've got to, there's an element of structure that you need to have to your workflow as well, because it's really, really easy to, like you say, even with good prompts, it's really, really easy to end up with, and I'm kind of interchangeably use this term, but like spaghetti code, right? Code that is going to do what it needs to do. It'll achieve your end goal, but is it the right, has it been written and drafted in the right way for the end product?
Yeah,
Is it been built and structured properly so that when you get to the end of your goal, the end of whatever it is you're building, it all makes sense and it's all cohesive. So there's a structure and a workflow that
yeah,
you kind of have to have as well. And I think that's what that's where I don't know. I mean, I haven't looked into any detail,
mm,
but I'm seeing these new AI architects certifications. And I think that's kind of the idea is that you learn to be able to prompt, but you also learn to have a structured workflow that means you it's never going to be deterministic with AI. But trying to get a similar outcome and being able to follow through that structure, I think is really important. I think that's where this whole sort of AI architect certification kind of comes into play.
yeah.
And I think we'll see more of it. And it's not a case of software engineers being dropped or falling by the wayside. I think they're still, important. But AI is making it a lot more accessible, you know?
Well, absolutely.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And one thing I found going back to that is setting guardrails. So again, with my integration with Obsidian, and I really recommend to anyone, whether you want to
yeah. I
use
want to touch on
Obsidian
this. Yeah,
or another product, is where you can create skills and these markdown files to create a theme or something.
trying.
That's now in Obsidian. So if I'm going between different tools, they can still reference the same material. Whereas obviously if you're just using Claude and you create a local markdown file that says this is how I want things laid out, if you're going to use an OpenAI tool, that can't see that. So that's
Yeah,
where it comes in handy as well, because you can share, you kind of got that full life cycle between all your tooling. So yeah, I'd absolutely recommend people look at, but whether you want to use that on Notion or, another product, yeah, that's a game changer. And as we mentioned earlier, the Microsoft Learn MCP server. So some of the tools that well, in fact, I think most of them that I've created for public use have been trying to solve a Microsoft security thing that I struggle with. Conditional access policies, I think, are a nightmare. Um, and one of the things I wanted to do was turn those on their head and say, we're putting in policies, but we never explain to people why we're doing it. So I created, there's two variations of it, but using the MITRE ATT&CK framework to explain why you need that specific control, because you're protecting against that type of MITRE attack. But to ensure that I got the Microsoft side accurate, it would then reference Microsoft Learn through this MCP server to ensure that the content was absolutely accurate. Because if you trust the tool, it's not always going to give you what you think is right. And that's where I think you can't just rely on AI to become an expert. You have to know these products still, whatever you're developing for,
Yeah.
because you have to steer it. So I think people need to be very wary that they're not going to go into a place and solve an issue just because they've got an AI tool. You've got to know what you're doing as well. And yeah, so
100%.
that's something we need to highlight still. It's not going to replace people. It's an enabler
Yeah.
yeah,
potentially.
yeah, yeah. The whole MCP piece then is you are effectively grounding your LLM in a subset of knowledge
Mm,
so that when you are building your application, you can refer to that knowledge and it can pull information from it. Essentially, that's kind of what you're doing with the MCP server,
yes,
right?
yes.
Okay. And how does that work? I haven't played much with MCP servers, but you mentioned it was a Microsoft Learn MCP server. So is that like a Microsoft hosted thing and you just connect to an API, or is that, how
I
does that
think you
work?
can do. So the way I've got it set up on my MacBook is I've got Docker Desktop installed, just the free version. And
Yeah.
within that, you can enable the use of MCP servers. And they've got a library in there. I think it's about 384 different MCP server types.
Wow.
So I was just looking through there, seeing what I recognize. Oh, it's Microsoft Learn. Brilliant. Install. Then I enable the connectivity between my Docker instance and Claude as an example. Done. It can then see any MCP server I've created in there. Another one that I wanted to use was Draw.io, say for architecture diagrams, but that wasn't supported. So I had to kind of then suss out how to install that as a container. And it was pretty straightforward. But I think, I mean, the people watching this might know it more accurate than I do, but I think it's more of like an API gateway to your data source. So instead of having to then pop in lots of URLs and say, look at this, it's just literally using an API to then connect to that data source, and
Yeah.
it's a bit faster.
Yeah, I think the way I've kind of heard them explained is it's essentially a wrapper around an API, so that your LLM can,
Yeah,
interface with it more easily. Yeah,
yeah,
that's interesting. Okay, so you're saying that you can install Docker, and Docker actually has a feature that allows you to effectively just enable certain MCP servers locally in your Docker instance. I did
yes,
not know that.
yeah.
I did
It's
not know that.
brilliant.
That's cool.
Yeah,
Mm,
yeah,
that's
absolute game changer.
interesting. I mean, I'm similar to you. I've got Docker installed, but I haven't played around with it. And again, this falls back on the fact that I'm not a developer. I don't use Docker. I kind of know what it is, container virtualization at a high level. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I only have it installed because Claude told me to install it because I needed it to do something. you know. So I haven't actually gone clicking around it to figure any of this stuff out, but that's really good to know.
Yeah.
I will definitely be going away and doing that.
I mean, I've not used Docker for years. I mean, all I remember is Docker pull and Docker push. I think they were the two commands I used. And this is going back years when I was just playing around with, I think, Linux stuff. I know Docker's more than just Linux. But yeah, I've not really touched Docker for goodness knows how long. It's more so because I've always thought it was a dark art, but I don't think it is. I guess there are people who think that what we do is a dark art as well. It's just that unknown, and again, that's where AI I think is been really handy to shed that light on things as well, and it makes it more accessible. Yeah, it's just mind blowing sometimes. Yeah, you think you're just getting into it, but you're only scratching the tip of the iceberg.
I think one of the things I struggled with, a bit like you said at the start, Nate, with AI is it you know, it's kind of almost got to a point of so what? Because from my experience doing security architecture, you would always identify the problem and then you produce the outcome, which would be a tool or whatever to solve the problem. And what seemed to have happened was AI came along to fix a problem we didn't know what the problem was. It's kind of, there's this whole new thing, and where does it fit? And so people have been using it probably badly because none of us have really been trained how to get the best out of it. And now we've got to this next level of integration where it's doing some fantastic stuff, but we're having to learn simple infrastructure things that we normally not really have to worry about to get the best out of it. But then how's that going to work in the corporate world? Because if I said to you on my work laptop, well, I want to install Docker Desktop, I don't think so, mate. Security compliance, they're going to be all over it. So that opens up another whole can of worms. How are people really going to start getting the best out of these tools when we also need to worry about the restrictions and the guardrails around it?
Yeah, I totally agree. And, there isn't a whole lot of realistic guardrails around it from a local perspective. Once you've got VS Code and those extensions installed, if you've got the capability to say, yes, you can have access to that folder, it can do what it wants. So it is going to be a tricky one. And I think it'll be interesting to see how things progress in that space, for sure.
It's, something I've learned over the last 6 months or so. It also comes back to RBAC as well. So trying to pull in that security aspect to it. So my VS Code stuff, I have it to publish directly to my Azure resources. And one of the apps I was working on, it decided to delete the whole database. It's like, no, I didn't want you to delete it. And it was, oh, sorry, yes, that's a fundamental flaw on my mistake. I do apologize. It's like, yeah, sorry, it's not going to cut it. Can you restore it? No, we didn't have a backup. It's like, but it's, you need to get your RBAC sorted as well. So it's a case of your privileged accounts for Azure. So you're using it in the way it should be. So you've got maybe write access to it, but you can't delete resources. So when you do come to publishing it, it does it through that authorized process. So I guess that's where the CI/CD pipelines come into play. And probably you want to look at something like DevOps or whatever. Again, DevOps, dark art to me. But that's the thing. If you just go away and do it, you've got full autonomy. And whilst it can be quite powerful, it can be quite powerful in a negative way, and it will just blast your entire infrastructure. Because I was using it to create a finance system for my new business, and it just decides to delete the database. And it's like, oh, I don't want you to do that. I've got to repopulate all the information in there again. Yeah, but it's every day's a school day. You live and learn. But it's these kind of things you need to get those fundamentals right first, I think.
Yeah, and again, it kind of it kind of goes back to what I was saying about building the app and getting the code right, having that structured workflow and that structured process doesn't just apply to prompting, it applies to building and testing. And you mentioned CI/CD, making sure you've got a proper process in place so that if something does go tits up, you can reverse it if you need to.
Exactly.
And it's everyone's learning, and this is kind of back to what I was saying before. I'm not a software developer. You're not a software developer, and we're just learning all the time. But it is fun, it is interesting, and it's also fucking terrifying.
Yeah.
To be honest. You've seen all sorts of horror stories online. I mean, I spend quite a lot of time on Reddit looking through Reddit threads on certain things related to Claude code and GitHub Copilot. I read one instance where somebody had used Claude code to spin up a virtual machine in some sort of cloud hosting platform. I forget what it was, but it had opened a port to the world and then was immediately infected by some sort of crypto. I think it was some malware that installed like a crypto miner or something. Yeah. It was pretty bad. And the cloud hosting provider themselves basically had notified this particular user saying, "Hey, there's something wrong with this VM. You need to check it out and switch it off." Basically,
Yeah.
Thankfully, the cloud hosting provider did a really great job of containerizing everything, so it couldn't spread anywhere, but it could have been worse, and that was all because the particular user wasn't a software developer. They didn't understand virtual machines. They didn't understand how to containerize stuff properly. They didn't understand networking. They didn't understand ports, like opening ports to the world. So Claude Code just did what it needed to do to get the job done.
Yeah.
So there is still, you still have to have an understanding of things like the fundamentals and all that kind of stuff. So yeah. It is terrifying though.
If you don't say, I need this to be secure, or do this with best practice in mind, it'll just go ahead and do it. I mean, I remember when I created a VM for a customer years and years and years ago, we tied everything down so RDP wasn't accessible. This was in Azure, so it's just at the start when Azure was being used as IaaS, and they wanted to put a DC in Azure, and so everything was locked down, but the customer then wanted to log on from their home IP address. So what they did was they just went in, edited the NSG, and just allowed anything access to port 3389. And the next day they're wondering why their server got hacked and they had ransomware installed in their DC. It was like, yeah, go figure. But it's that kind of thing. If you're not explicit, then it's going to just create it with the bare minimum.
And I guess to your point, James, about using Obsidian, because Obsidian is effectively just a whole bunch of Markdown files, and I think the tool itself, I've not used Obsidian for quite a few years, but it does this. It gives you the capability to connect Markdown files to Markdown files, so that when you're kind of viewing it, you get this like lovely spider diagram of where Markdown files are sort of connected, which I think is quite nice. But to Andy's point of giving it proper instructions and telling it what you need and adding guardrails, and you mentioned guardrails, James, is that the kind of information that you specify in your Markdown files? So when you're saying to Claude, "Hey, I've got this idea for a product," or whatever it might be, you were saying there that it will go away and then it'll write that to your Obsidian. Presumably that will create some sort of a PRD, like a product document, as a Markdown file. And so are you specifying those kind of instructions and stuff within there as well? So if you know ahead of time, hey, I don't want, port 3389 to be open to the world, you would specify those instructions.
Yes, and I'm not doing anything to that extent at the moment, although I'm working on that. But it's more around design themes, content requirements, so anything to font colors and types, and so I now have themes that I like that are in there, and it references those. If I say I want to design this app using this theme, it will do that.
We've been joined by Steve.
Yeah. Hey, Steve.
Hi, sorry I'm late, guys.
All right.
Mind blowing.
I didn't think you were joining. This is a nice
Yeah,
surprise.
yeah. I'll talk to you about it afterwards. I had to defend some technology stuff, politics. So I shall go into no more detail. But yeah, sorry I'm late.
All good, all good. Yeah, we were just chatting through vibe coding, obviously the topic of the day. Um, just talking about providing custom instructions to our LLMs. James is using, I don't know if you're familiar with Obsidian, but James is using Obsidian for providing the Markdown files to the LLMs that he's using, OpenAI's Codex and Claude Code. And it's effectively just it's like a database of MD files that can all be linked together, should you want to link them together. James has got a pretty cool setup that allows him to effectively just tell Claude what he wants to do. Claude will go away and sort of iterate and start building a product document, and we'll store that in Obsidian, which is pretty cool. I really like the idea of using Obsidian. And you mentioned, James, that that makes it really easy for the other tools that you're using to then just pick that up
Yes,
as well.
absolutely.
Have you run into any issues with context window when using Obsidian? Because I know from my experience, and maybe we'll touch on this in another episode. Maybe we're probably going to not have time today, but I use a workflow that's known as GSD, or Get Shit Done.
Yep.
And that has a very methodical way of dealing with context rot. Again, it uses Markdown files to basically create atomic commits to your code base so that the next time you open a session, it loads just what it needs to be able to continue. How would something like that work with Obsidian? Like, does it load the entire database? Does it load individual Markdown files? And does it kill your context right from the get-go on a new session?
So it only refers to Obsidian when I tell it to.
Okay.
So if there's a particular piece of content, such as a design Markdown file, or if I've got research material in there, I could say, check this Obsidian, this particular section, and let's discuss or create something using that particular content. So it doesn't load anything by default.
Okay. That's good. That's good to know. I have seen others using Obsidian. I did wonder whether it was worthwhile and something that I might look into. And now that you've kind of recommended it as well, I'll probably take a look.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting.
It's really straightforward. As I say, when you install Obsidian, you have to install a plugin which gives you the API connection capability, and that's the piece that you share to allow the MCP server to communicate with it. But we can go through that, outside of this or on another call, or whatever really. But it's I'd say that was the game changer for me, having that capability.
Yeah. No, that is very cool. I definitely want to have a play around with that for sure. And again, the whole Docker MCP thing, you've blown my mind with that. I had no idea you could just go ahead and enable, a whole load of MCP servers directly in Docker and then just give access to your agents. Like, that's very cool. Very cool indeed. So why don't you give us because we are coming up to time. Why don't you give us a quick rundown on the tools that you've been creating, James? Because I've obviously spent a little bit of time looking at them. We've chatted already prior to this call. Why don't you sort of, go through it with Andy and Steve and our listeners and kind of walk through what you've been building, because they are very cool. And feel free to throw them up on screen if you want to as well.
Yeah. I will certainly see if I can try.
And they're all, on the topic of sort of Microsoft MCP servers, they're all related to Microsoft security, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the very latest one that I've done is Microsoft Defender for Cloud Workbench. And if I go into it, this one basically came about. I was doing some work in Defender for Cloud for a job I was on. And what I was struggling with was actually drilling into data and finding where all the issues were, because there were, it was a large portion of things to go through. So I I thought, how can I make this a little bit easier to use? So this is a standalone tool. You don't connect to it using an enterprise app or anything. You basically just import the CSV from Defender for Cloud. This is all dummy data, by the way. But the idea being is that you can go through all of the findings on the main page, or you can go in through a topology page. And what this does is it lists all the subscriptions you've got, so you can filter by a particular subscription, and then off of that, you can drill down and see all of your resource groups, all of the other workloads that are in there, or you can drill down further. Another one being reports. So if you've got lots of high findings, you can click onto high, and then it will break down for you all of the different issues that it's got. I think the next step for me on this was to create more of a tracker, so you could then potentially assign things to people and track it that way. I didn't progress any further, but it was just a really nice way to quickly get an idea of the scale of the problems that you've got. Because I don't think Defender for Cloud in its current state is that brilliant at doing this.
Yeah, that's cool. So you're effectively taking you mentioned a CSV, so presumably there's an export that you can run in Defender for Cloud.
Yeah.
To grab that data.
Yes.
And then you just import it into this platform.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's literally export the CSV file and then import it in. And
okay.
I quite like tools like that, to be fair. There's the conditional access, like Illustrator, one that turns it into like a PowerPoint presentation, which you can either plug it straight into your tenant and it'll gather the data, or if you're a bit dubious about doing that, you can do an export, pull it into the tool, and the tool will show you everything. I'm a big fan of those, to be fair. So that's a nice touch, nice feature. I like that.
Yeah, interested to know, just to dig into that a little bit. Is that data stored anywhere
in your browser?
Or...
Nice. It's just in your browser. So if you do a refresh, it's gone.
Nice. Okay. And you mentioned that you're looking at adding some sort of tracking element to it. So in order to make that work, presumably you'd either need to have a persistent file locally or host it in the web app itself.
Yeah, and that goes down a route of accountability and security, and I'm just so these tools are publicly available on my repo. People can take them and do what they want with them. If they want to host it, go for it. I personally don't want that responsibility.
Yeah,
but it's creating ideas and concepts for people. This is one I mentioned earlier about conditional access. One of the things is trying to identify what's the best policy for the sort of account you're working on. So if you're doing administrator accounts and you want admin portals, if you want to protect against certain threats like brute force attacks, you drag that across and it will then tell you what the conditional access policies are that you should implement.
That's great.
Does that show you impact as well based on previous logon data?
No. But I'm building something else behind the scenes which does some really cool stuff. It's more of a journey around conditional access.
I quite like the impact feature in when you're designing conditional access policies. It's quite handy to see. I'd be interested if you could pull that metric as well.
Cool. It's got best practices as well, so it will tell you the kinds of things that you should be setting up. So that's that tool. The first one that I built was this one, and it's kind of a similar thing. And if we go to
see, it's things like this that we never would have thought we could create.
Oh, not a million
without
years.
the likes of AI with these kind of UIs. and the user experience and everything.
Yeah.
It's just like, how would we have done this without studying software development for years and years and years, probably. But having this at our fingertips now, I think is absolutely fantastic.
Totally.
It's funny you mention that, because one of our account managers came to me recently and was like, I want you to look over something I've been building. And I was like, oh, here we go. and he shared his screen with me, and it was basically like a web app similar to this, with all dynamic expanding tiles and stuff like that. And basically it allowed him to go through for his customer or his account in general and tick the different products and services that we offer, like our Intune projects or our MFA projects and all the stuff that we offer. And he basically added weighting to them. So they all had a weight or a heat map index. And based on which ones he ticked, it would slowly get greener in a certain scale. And it was, to be honest, it was awesome for like a sales lead generator, or for something for him to go to a customer and recommend, here's where the gaps are and stuff. It was phenomenal. And the fact that an account manager, no disrespect to account managers, but the fact that an account manager sat and came up with that over a couple of evenings, I think is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Well, it just goes back to what we were saying at the start, which is you don't need to know code. You need to have a vision, and you can build it.
Totally. Yeah.
So what if you're like me, though? What if you're a solution looking for problems? What if because I do that with so much stuff, with automation, with coding, with Arduinos, hardware. I usually go, oh, this would be really cool to do this. And then I go look for a problem to solve, rather than having a problem I need solving, which I've always found I'm more likely to finish a project and complete it to the point where it's actually useful when I have a problem to solve. But then I find myself in this rabbit hole of going, oh, this isn't a problem for anybody, but I'm now going to write a tool that fixes that. My home automation is a testament to this. There was nothing wrong with flicking a light switch on, but I could do it, so I did. You know what I mean? It's a very slippery slope sometimes, I think. But yeah, no, the enablement piece of this, Andy, like you said, I think it's amazing, because people who historically would have been frustrated with the fact that they had an idea of, they just knew what the data they wanted, what they wanted it to look like, but they had no way of doing that. And they'd go to people internally who'd say, oh, well, there's a development cost, there's a cost and expense to get this built, and what's the ROI going to be? Now I can just knock it up on an evening and show at least a proof of concept, whether it's the finished article or a proof of concept. You can at least go, this is what I want it to look like. Here's where the benefits are. And then other people can make the decision of, well, actually, yeah, that's great. We're going to invest some time and money in making this better and fleshing it out a little bit more.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's awesome. Does anybody else notice that it seems to default to dark mode a lot? Claude certainly does. Everything it's done for me is dark mode.
Mine was all light mode. Then it was, would you like to add a switch in this to change light mode to dark mode and vice versa?
These look awesome. I love dynamic web pages and stuff like this.
Yeah. So this one, basically, as you select as you go, it will start ticking off the MITRE ATT&CK threats. So that top one, the require phishing resistant MFA, has already ticked off quite a few. And then if you tick more, you might find that it does more. But it was.
So the idea behind this one is if you've done some sort of upfront threat mapping, for example, and the MITRE ATT&CK techniques and tactics that you want to mitigate against, you could come and use your tool and say, hey, this is the kind of stuff we want to implement, and these are the TTP that we want to. Okay, that's cool.
So I think one of my things with doing security architecture is the so what factor. Let's do all this lovely stuff. So what? What's it actually going to do? What are we protecting against? So by doing something like this, you can have a conversation with potentially non-security folk and say, right, these are the known threats. MITRE is kind of the go-to standard. So by doing these particular policies, we are helping to protect our environment against these own attacks. So it's just a way of trying to explain things without all the techie stuff that goes with it.
Yeah, I love it.
And then
very cool.
The zero trust one was kind of what I call a brain fart. It was, zero trust again is really tricky to explain to people. So it was looking at all the Microsoft capabilities, all the features, all the licensing, and what do you need to start doing some sort of zero trust. So it was really, if you use the security defaults of Microsoft, it will then just start to tell you what MITRE threats you're protecting against, and then what licensing requirements. So if I wanted to add, let's go, and say we want to do conditional access, device compliance, it will then tell you need the Microsoft Intra, P1 license, Intune Plan 1, etc.
Very cool. Very cool.
Then take you off to that page to look at.
Where's it pulling the feature and the license requirement from? Is that using M365 maps or something like that?
So this was using, again, my
MCP server.
MCP Learn server,
Right.
to reference the accurate data from Microsoft and then add that information straight into here.
I'm going to have to go back and watch the beginning after this podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you wanted to do risk-based conditional access, or you wanted to do internet layer access, it shows you where that fits in on the model, and then tells you further down what you need, and it's got additional sorts of information. So most of it's clickable, he says. Yeah, so you can be fairly sort of detailed on the type of things you want to select. If you want to go expert mode, and you apply the blueprint, and that's all the stuff you're going to need.
And then can you export from this as well? So does it let you export into some sort of a report format, or is it at the moment
It's
just
free. What do you want?
Thing?
It's on his GitHub.
No, it doesn't, but that's a good shout.
Well, just a thought, presumably you're going to be using something like this in the context of what we do, and certainly yourself as a consultant, you're going to be walking customers, users through what is zero trust, what does it mean, and walking through it and having that light bulb moment with them on the call is one thing, but then the people that you're talking to probably then need to go away and then explain that to somebody else in the environment, so that in the organization, so that they can come back and say, hey James, we want to work with you. So being able to kind of take that information away in some sort of a format that they can then take to C-suite or whoever it might be to say,
Yes,
this is what zero trust means for us, and these are what we need to do to implement it. Is something that is really interesting, I think, to think about.
This is where things can be pretty good. Again, James, you and I have spoken about this before. It's almost a sales lead.
Yeah.
So this is the bit that gives the awareness, and then it's a case of, right, we can then help you fix that. So here's a bunch of remediation steps, and then you can put that into a book of works kind of thing and say it's going to take X days or whatever. But I think one of the things, you and I have spoken about before was that the whole thing with, these tools are all really good, but obviously we're hosting them, we need to run them. So that's actually a cost to ourselves. So where do we draw the line at having these as a free tool? Now, I know this is still very much vibe coding, but actually there's some good IP in your tool that I think is pertinent to what you do. So it's almost, you don't want to then look at just giving it away for free.
No.
But at the same time, you got to dangle a carrot in front of somebody to get them to use it. And this is one of the minefields I've started to kind of really try and get my head around. It's where do you draw the line? Because
how do you draw it as well?
Yeah, it's what is a really good idea is actually your IP, and that's where it's really valuable. So it's then you need to start looking at, well, how can I market this? I don't want to turn this into a sales pitch or anything like that, but it's that whole thing of then where do you start putting license gates in? So where does it stop being a free tool to then users having to purchase something? Yeah. And this has actually been stuff I've really enjoyed learning. Like with integrated with Clerk for identity. So you can have users log into your things, but this goes back to where does your data get stored and how do you manage it as a SaaS application? And then things like Stripe for billing. So all these things will provide you with API keys that you can then just rather than you holding PII. Stripe deals with that, and you can just take credit card payments for that. And it's just absolutely mind-blowing what you can do. But at the same time, you don't want to do yourself an injustice and lose out on potential revenue.
No.
Yeah.
And it's one of those where the buy me a coffee link is only good for people who want to buy you a coffee. I mean, me personally, I've been making a conscious effort to support more open source projects. For example, I bought a U console a while ago, and one of the guys on the U console community, Rex, has done loads. He's built custom Linux distributions and all sorts. On his website, he's got a buy me a coffee link. I bought him 5 coffees, the maximum you can amount, because he saved me hours and hours of time. I've just started using Meshcore and Meshtastic and stuff, different conversation for different podcasts, but started using those. Again, they're open source projects as an option to donate or buy. And I've been kind of thinking, well, actually, people have put time and effort into these things. I'm going to put time and effort in, spend a little bit of cash. But at the same time, you don't want to be the WinRAR of the world, do you? Where everybody just closes the NAG every day.
40 years later, it's still working as a trial after 40 days.
Yeah. So it's an interesting one. At the same time, if you put the paywall up front, if you just make it a premium product, is anybody ever going to get to see it?
Yeah.
Or do you want to get, and you're also then responsible for supporting it. And if you don't, if you don't have a team behind you to continue supporting it, you're doing that yourself. And if you've already got a day job doing something else, it becomes like a vicious circle as well. And then you've got to be careful. You've got to be very careful with it.
Could you not just plug your tickets and your pull requests or your issues straight back into AI?
You can, to be fair, you can. I mean, if you are using GitHub for CI/CD, I'm presuming you'll be able to do the same in Azure DevOps. But if you're using GitHub, if you're using GitHub Copilot can take care of your pull requests, and they can do things like reviewing people's pull requests and issues and all that kind of stuff, and adding context. So before you even get it, they've done a lot of the triage for you.
There's a lot of risk for poisoning the code base there, though, isn't there? I imagine.
But it's also, you just want a response to RTFM.
Yeah.
And what I found with one of my tools I was playing around with is I created a docs site for it. So it's created a full-blown docs site where you can actually get the full knowledge base of the app. And it was that was mind-blowing how it did that. So it created a full subdomain. So you just go to docs.domain.com and it gives you a full kind of KB article. And it was like, oh, this is pretty intense, actually. So just first point of call, RTFM.
And I presume that could be somewhat organic, couldn't it? As more issues come in, you feed it back and it looks at previous issues and previous questions and improves the documentation to try and reduce the amount of requests that are coming in.
Absolutely. That's 100% the way to do it, without a shadow of a doubt. And to your point of using docs, I just want to quick shout out to Playwright. And I don't know if you guys have used Playwright as a I think it's actually an MCP server. I could be wrong. But Playwright allows you to extend your agents to your browser so that they can go away and they can access whatever it is you're building via a browser. They can go and click around, they can see it, they can take screenshots, and they can debug in the browser themselves. So you don't actually have to go away and do manual UAT. Playwright's been around for a little bit of time, quite a while now, but the VS Code team have also just recently introduced integrated browser into VS Code. So if you hit, I think it's like Control, Shift, and P on the keyboard when you're in VS Code, you can just search for integrated browser, and you can open up a browser within VS Code, which is effectively the same thing as Playwright. And there's a little toggle that you just press share with agent. As soon as you do that, you can just say, once you get to UAT section, you can just say, I've given you access to the integrated browser, go away and do all the testing. And you'll see it clicking around your website, and it'll test it all. It'll go, hey, we found a bug here. I'm going to add that to the list. I'll deal with that. Found another bug here. And it just does it all for you. And I just think that is just worth so much, because when I've been trying to, I don't know if you guys are familiar with EntraOps. Thomas Naunheim created EntraOps, which allows you to, it's effectively AD tiering, but in Entra. And it's quite complicated. Like looking through the documents, everything's through PowerShell modules, And I was like, this is cool, but it needs to be easier. So I'm in the process. I was speaking to him at MVP Summit. I'm in the process of trying to build a front end for that to make it easier to work with. So rather than you having to run all of these PowerShell commands and kind of understanding what they do, because effectively all they do is they just pull down JSON files and then make changes in Entra to enable things, to create things like administrative groups, security attributes, all that kind of administrative units, sorry, and security attributes and a whole load of other things, even conditional access policies. And I was just like, I don't want to do that via a console. I want a browser, a web interface that makes it easy to understand what's happening. So I'm building a front end for that. And again, not a software developer, and I also can't be asked doing UAT manually. So if I can just say, there's the browser, go away and test it, I'm going to do it. Nice. So yeah, shout out, if you're not using Playwright or the integrated browser in VS Code, use it because it is hella cool.
I just realized I have actually used Playwright in the past, but that was for trying to automate Epic game purchases to try and get it to automatically get the free Epic game every month, but they've added too many bot controls now. It doesn't work. But yeah, I've used it in the past. Yeah, is it Firefox by default?
I don't know. I think it's Chrome by default. I could be wrong. Yeah, I think it's Chrome by default. But yeah, I mean, and the good thing is, like, you don't even need to do anything. You literally just say to whatever LLM you're using, go and use Playwright, and it'll just install it for you. You know, you don't have to do anything. So it's very, very easy. Pretty easy to work with. Cool. Okay. Well, look, I mean, we have definitely come up to time. I think we're almost at the hour mark for the episode. That's for sure. But look, I mean, it was a really great chatting with you, James. It was good to dig into your process, the kind of tooling that you're using. Very, very interesting. I'm definitely going to go away and do some digging with the Obsidian thing because I think that is really, really cool. And actually, I'm going to dig into the whole Docker MCP thing too. So yeah, some really good nuggets of information there. Great to run through your tools as well. I will provide a link in the description to the episode to your URL so people can actually go away and find them if they don't know where they are. And I'll provide a link to everybody's sort of LinkedIn profile as well. Thanks, Steve, for joining us for 10 minutes.
Sorry, I was late.
It's all good, man. It's all good. Hopefully we'll get you next time.
I think for anybody watching, it'd be really cool to know what everybody else is on with as well, I think.
Yes.
Because it's not just us, we know it's not. And there's a lot of noise at the minute. So if anybody wants to shout out what they're doing in the comments, use it as a platform, we'll take a look because it's going to get harder to find the really cool things, I think, with everything that's going on at the minute. So if we all hype each other up and shout about it, we can see what's genuinely worth looking at as well, I think.
Totally. Well said. Well said. Well said. Cool. Okay. Well, with that, we will close out. Thank you, James. It's great to have you on. Andy, Steve, always a pleasure. Take it easy, guys.
Cheers, mate. Cheers, guys.
Like you said,
Have a good weekend.